Finally, in SEAL training, there's a bell. All you have to do to quit is ring the bell. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to wake up at 5 o'clock. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to do the runs, the obstacle course, the PT, and you no longer have to endure the hardships of training. If you want to change the world, don't ever ring the bell.
You are listening to the Kill to Quit podcast hour presented by Kill Clip Performance Drinks.
Enjoy drinking Kill Clip after sweaty workouts, big rides, full rounds, long days, longer nights, or whenever you feel the need to get back up to full speed.
Kill Clip Performance Drinks for Warriors. Ignite, endure, recover. And now, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into Kill to Quit, brought to you by Kill Clip. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest, a former Special Forces Green Beret who served 21 years in the Army, including 9 deployments overseas. He was medically retired after numerous injuries he received. He currently is the president and CEO for the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation. He is Michael Rodriguez joining us here on Kill to Quit. Michael, thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I'm humbled to be on here, man. You guys have had some pretty amazing folks on this show, so I'll see you trying to add my dos centavos.
All right, well, let's start back at the beginning because, look, you don't get to do 21 years of service in the military and deploy and everything else without the foundation to get there. And as I understand it, you come from a long line of military members in your family.
So growing up, my first heroes were, my father. And my grandfathers. And my father, fought in Vietnam. Grandfathers, obviously, during World War II. So I always looked up to them. The very quiet, stoic, strong men. Foundations for the family. Worked their entire lives, and I always looked up to that, admired that. So that was my socialization. So those were my heroes. They never really talked about the war. I knew they served only because my mom or my grandmother told me. I always looked up to that. I played with little army men, and those are my first heroes, even well before, comic books or anything like that. So I looked up to them and the huge imprinting they had on me. It was just, I'm the oldest of 5 boys, and, I'm the firstborn grandson on my father's side. So they were the guys I wanted to be. And that, since as far back as I can remember, I knew I was going to join the military.
So as you're growing up, are you playing sports and other things, or is kind of just your sole focus, being an Army man kind of deal?
No, so growing up, I'm from southern New Mexico. It's a little town called Las Cruces. So growing up, I played soccer. That was, we're a very cultural family, so soccer was always big. So I played soccer as a child, and I was okay. I was fortunate to get on a pretty good team, and I remember as a child, we were the very first team, because we're right there on the border with Juarez, Mexico, right there.
Yep.
So I remember growing up, our team, we were the very first team to beat Juarez. So what Juarez would do is a huge city. They got their best soccer players together, and then they would cross the border and play El Paso teams, El Paso, Texas, because we were close to there, and then come over to Las Cruces and play. And they would just destroy everybody. They were just they were the best, So I remember the very first time we played them, we actually beat them, and that had never happened before. So that was really awesome for us to see. They showed up in a big tour bus, and they were it was almost like a professional team. We were just, we had T-shirts for, not a very wealthy team or anything. We had T-shirts for
jerseys,
jerseys, and everyone had to buy their own shorts. So it was awesome, as a child to do that. So I played, and then I got into more some boxing a little bit when I got into high school. I never played for any of the schools or anything. I tried football for a minute, but I was a little small growing up, and I was just getting tossed around everywhere. I was pretty quick, but I just the coach was like, "You need to find something else." I'm like, "Okay." So that was kind of my journey into sports, was mainly soccer and some boxing.
So as you're going through high school and you're playing sports and everything else, and you're watching your friends do all these things, anything else tug at you to kind of pull you away, friends or whatever, to get away from the military? Or is that just always something that was still in the front of your mind?
No, that was something that was always in the front of mind. Ironically, the thing that was, I guess, tugging me away from the military was my father. I never, he was a Vietnam veteran, served. He was there during, pretty rough years. I saw some pretty hellacious combat, and obviously, he did not have a good experience. I don't know many Vietnam veterans that would say they had a great experience in Vietnam. We had a cousin who died in Vietnam, who's on the wall right now. So he did not want that for any of his children. So I never really talked. I would bring it up. He's like, no, you don't need to join the Army. You can do something else. You're smart. Go to college. My family, we didn't, we had one aunt that got to go to college. So he was, I want you to go to college. I want you to become something. Use your brain, not your brawn. So that was, it was kind of funny. That was the only thing that was. So I kept kind of my dream to myself, sort of. I didn't really talk about it. So there was no one really tugging away. It was just my dad wasn't really supportive of it.
That's interesting. When your dad is trying to steer you in a direction, did it make you more desire to go into the military because your parents tell you? Because listen, your parents say, "I don't want you to ride that motorcycle." You know what you do? You go get on the motorcycle. So, I mean, did his resistance kind of grow that desire more?
No, not really. I don't think it did. It kind of made me really make the decision myself. So it forced me to well, why does he not want me to go? So I started asking some hard questions, not just of my father, but my grandfathers, and then they saw my general interest in it. So they kind of peeled the curtain a little bit and shared a little bit. And the one thing I do remember most, like I said, my grandfather and my father, they never talked about the war. They never talked about what they did or the experiences. I learned later, really what they did, which was pretty amazing. Did
you ever press them on it when you were younger, before you got in?
I didn't, because I was very respectful.
Right.
Not fearful, so I'm a very respect-minded person. But the one thing that struck me most was, they wouldn't share the stories. What they would share with me was those that they served with. So they would, they remembered their brothers, that never came home, or those that they served with, and they would tell these stories, about, my dad has a story that he tells me about this guy he served with from Brooklyn, who's missing most of his teeth, and my dad would always, that was the only time my father ever talked about the Vietnam conflict, and he would smile because he was talking about, his brothers. So I remember that, and even with my grandfathers and my great uncles, my grandparents' brothers, who also served during World War II, they were part of the D-Day invasion. One of them was in the 82nd that jumped in on that day.
Wow.
And that all of them, that was a common theme. They talked about those they served with, and that camaraderie and that love. It was the first time, very strong family, but it was like love for, another man, in that regard, like as family, outside of our family. So growing up with a cultural family, Mexican culture, it was somewhat, wow, that was somewhat foreign. Like, well, you love people that's not your family, not that we're closed-minded or anything, but it was very intriguing for me to see that love and that they had. So I wanted to experience that. I wanted to see that. So that kind of, that's what I think they knew that I was going to do it anyway. So they're like, well, let's just, because I was very headstrong. I love the challenge. So I think that's why they kind of did that way. So that struck me, that caring, and they remembered all their names and the stories. And that was the only times I remember, my father, my grandfathers, or my great uncles smiling when they talked about the war.
He is Michael Rodriguez, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. Michael is a retired Green Beret from the United States Army. He's 21 years of service. As you were going through high school, what did your friends say when you told them you were going to go into the Army? Because this is like in the mid-'90s. There's no war going on. There's no conflict. It's almost like, hey, can't you get a job kind of deal?
Yeah, they thought I was nuts. So a lot of my friends, growing up, I played sports, but I wouldn't consider like a jock. I wasn't very well known. I wasn't like a popular guy. I was really very shy, very reserved, dorky kid. I would say like a skinny, dorky kid from New Mexico. I was very young. So I graduated high school right when I was 16 years old. So
wow.
I used to think I used to be a person of reasonable intelligence. So I skipped a grade. They boosted me up a little bit. So I didn't go to fourth grade. So I was younger, and I was younger starting school anyway. So I was young. It was immature in the growth aspect. A lot of my friends, I was in like some advanced classes. So a lot of my friends were very, very intelligent guys, and like I said, dorky guy, I never had a girlfriend, never any of that. I was very, very awkward child. So my friends thought I was crazy. I was the only one kind of in that group that played sports. They were extremely academic guys. But I love sports. I love being physical. I'm a physical guy. I like being physically active. And me and my brothers were always playing outside, and always running, always doing something. So, but they thought I was crazy for joining the Army. I was like, come on, guys. I wanted someone do it with me, because I had a program back then. If you joined with your buddy, you were like, instead of going in as an E1, you go in as an E2. And I was like, well, I can make a couple extra bucks, So it was like a, sneaky recruiter, I guess. But they all thought I was nuts, man. They really thought I was crazy for wanting to do it. And when I was my senior year in high school, was during the Desert Storm, and I was like, wow, there's a war going on where I want to be part of that. I want to get in the fight. That was what I thought. But like I told you, I was 16 years old in my senior year, so I couldn't. So I had to wait, to join, and I enlisted when I was 17 finally.
All right. So when you finally enlist, you go off to boot camp and everything else. I mean, are you in a place where you're like, oh, this is awesome kind of deal, even though you're getting your butt kicked in boot camp, or was it a rude awakening for you?
I loved it. Like I said, I'm kind of a headstrong person. I love a challenge. So, and like I said, I come from a sports background. So, I've been an athlete my entire life, just different sports or different activities. So I trained my ass off. I was like, all right, I don't want to be that guy, and it was funny, before I joined the Army, I figured that out. I was like, I don't want to be that guy that gets singled out. And that's the thing. I mean, you serve there, you don't want to be that guy. So I worked my ass off, even more so with focusing on what the Army was going to present to me. So I was running all the time. I used to be a really good runner, push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, doing whatever I could to train to get ready. So when I got there, I loved it. It was amazing. I loved the challenge. I wasn't, they were yelling at me. I'm like, all right, okay, I'm a man of action. Everyone's defined by their individual actions. That's what I believe. So I was like, all right, give me a challenge and I'll do it. So I was fortunate that, in my class, my basic training class, I think I had prepared the most. So I was the fastest. No one could do more push-ups than me. No one could do more sit-ups than me. And I'm not bragging. It's just because I was ready. I was prepared. Some people showed up and couldn't do 10 push-ups, and that shocked me. I'm like, what kind of responsibility are you, kind of an individual who's responsible joining the military? If you fully understand what's required or asked of you, you should prepare for that. And that's why I think physical fitness is as much a tenet of service in the military as anything. You should be physically fit. That's part of your job. So I was prepared, and I loved it. I really did.
All right, so after you go through boot camp, and for those non-military folks who don't know, boot camp life is different than regular Army life. So when you get to your first duty station and, again, there's no war going on at this point in time, is this what you thought it would be like? Because, again, your father didn't tell you much about the service, right?
Right. So, during the training, you hear a lot of rumors, guys in training, and no one knows what it's going to be like. When you get to, it's called permanent party, is what they used to say back then. So then I got sent to the 10th Mountain Division, which is a light infantry unit located in upstate New York. So I went to basic training, and then I went to my training, then airborne school, and then I got sent to a unit that wasn't airborne. And I was like, oh, that's fine, I'll go. And I
do have to ask you though. Time out a second. You know, from a kid from New Mexico on the New Mexico Texas Mexico border, the coldness of the 10th Mountain Division in upstate New York must have been a culture shock for you.
Yeah, it was amazing. That's all I can say. It was amazing. So like the sun disappears from October till I don't know, spring, So it was a shock. But when I got there, it was freezing. It was cold. But just shortly after I got there, probably about 6-7 weeks after I got there, Somalia kicked off. And when it was December of 92 was when the very first forces went into to Somalia, which was the Marines. outside of some special operations guys that were already there. So then right after that, they're like, hey, we're going. Hey, Private Rodriguez, you're going to Somalia. And I was like, that's freaking awesome. I knew where it was. Like I told you, I was like a dorky kid, back when being a nerd wasn't cool like it is now, it seems.
Yeah.
I knew where Somalia was. It was in the Horn of Africa. I could tell you almost everything about it. And it was a rough nation it's been in peril for almost that forever, So I was excited, I'm like, oh, wow, that's awesome. There's something, here's my thing. And then the initial parts of Somalia was Operation Restore Hope. And this is well before Black Hawk Down. We were going out there to help just get aid to deliver food to those that needed it. So, I deployed Somalia, and I think that was somewhat set my azimuth, locked it in as far as me making the military career, because I saw what we were able to do as a nation, wearing in the military as well. Is we're not just defending national security or hunting down bad guys, which we're really, really good at. I'll tell you, my career culminated with that. We're really good at finding bad guys. No matter where they go, we're going to find you.
Yep.
But we also very good at freeing the oppressed, helping people in need. So that's what it was. I was part of the humanitarian portion of that, and yes, still people were still shooting at us, and it was still sketchy time, but it wasn't really full on conflict. But I saw, bringing hope, like true hope, to people that were living not day by day, but moment by moment. We were able to help by getting the food, the rice, away from the coastal areas inland, where you had these little camps of children just huddled together, just waiting to die because their parents had died well before, and the distended bellies. And the one thing was that the children are always smiling. Those are things that I'll always remember, is no matter what situation they were in, when they saw us, their eyes lit up, they smile, whether they had lost their teeth or not at that point, because it happens with malnutrition. And for me, it was 18-year-old kid who never really left New Mexico. The first time I got on a plane was to fly to basic training. The second time I got on a plane, I had to jump out of it in airborne school. So with very little experience in the world, for me, it was amazing. And like I said, it kind of locked my azimuth into serving our nation in that capacity.
He is Michael Rodriguez, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. When we come back, Michael's journey into the Special Forces and becoming a Green Beret and his deployments overseas. Don't go anywhere. This is Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour, presented by Kill Cliff Performance Drinks.
Kill Cliff, performance drinks for warriors, to get you up, get you through, and get you back to full speed.
And now, back to the show with host Mark Zinno.
Welcome back to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is Michael Rodriguez, a retired Special Forces Green Beret, 9 deployments overseas, 21 years of service to our nation, and currently the president and CEO for the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation. We last left off, Michael had finished his time, or was finishing his time in Somalia. You mentioned something a moment ago that kind of triggered me. You talked about freeing the oppressed, and for those who don't know, the motto of the Green Berets of the Special Forces is De Oppresso Librare, which means to free the oppressed. Was your experience in Somalia the thing that drove you to go for Special Forces?
Yep, you nailed it, Mark. That's exactly what it was. I saw, after I deployed to Somalia, I saw some Green Berets, some Special Forces guys, and anytime we get there, they were already there, and they had somewhat of a mystique or aura around them. I was a private. I didn't know crap, so I would see them, and they just seemed different. They all seemed to be, they were interacting with the local populace far more than we were. And I was like, wow, who are those guys, first of all? And why do they get to do that? And why aren't they wearing all the same crap we're wearing? They didn't have to wear helmets. They had one of them. At one time I saw one, they had a pet monkey. I'm like, man, that's cool. I want a pet monkey, So you're right. I saw them and what they were able to do, a small group, a small team of men. And I wanted a taste of that, because after I deployed to Somalia, I got to deploy to Haiti, for that Operation Restore Democracy after the military coup, 8 months after the democratic election in Haiti. Cedras came in and had a military coup. So that was 94, excuse me. And then I saw the Special Forces guys again there, the Green Berets, and I'm like, that was the catalyst really and decision for me to throw my hat in the ring, go to selection, and see what happens.
Now, you're trying to become a part of one of the most elite fighting forces in the world, not only in the United States Army. You talked about physical fitness. That's obviously a big part of getting through that whole thing. But when you go through the assessment and selection process, what was the toughest part about that for you?
So for selection, just for people so they understand a little bit more about selection. So for Special Forces, selection is like a 21-day selection. That's what they call it. But people assume they're like, oh, that's all it takes. And if you make it, okay, you're good. Selection is never ending. That's one they don't understand. Selection is never ending. It's nonstop. That just gets your foot in the door. So if you make it through that 21 days, and it's I had a blast. I'm not gonna lie. It was I'm not gonna say it was easy, but I had fun because it's all individual based. They want to see what you can do. They don't yell at you. They're like, all right, here's a task. All right, I want be here at this time with this equipment, this weight, and then follow instructions when you get there. Okay, so you show up, and then it's like, all right, start running, follow the cones. Okay, you don't know if you're running 2 miles, you don't know if you're running 20 miles. It's that great unknown. They just want to assess you to see how you perform physically, and the psychological stresses of like, all right, you're being tested. You're being tested. You're being evaluated, but you don't know. I mean, do I go all out? Is the next cone right around the corner, or do I have to pace myself? So I had a blast. I'm not gonna, I loved it. And again, much like my experience at basic training, I saw guys that did not prepare, and I was like, "What the hell are you doing here, man? That's crazy." I had a guy tell me, because in the barracks you get like 4 hours of sleep a night. Mm-hmm. I was like, "What'd you do to prepare?" I did a lot of power yoga, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, good luck with that, man. Power yoga. All right, good deal. I didn't know that was a thing, but okay." And nothing against yoga. I think it's great, but this is a little bit different. Just getting through selection, that just gets your foot in the door. Then you go through the qualification course. It's called the Q course, and guys drop like flies all the time. It's never ending. There's the physical challenges are always there. And that's when you get into a lot more of the academic challenges as well. It's not just a strong man's game; it's a thinking man's game. And that's the real, probably the most the strongest muscle we have and most impactful anyway is your brain. So that's when I was really academically challenged, because they would throw stuff at you, feeding you with a fire hose on everything you had to learn. And within Special Forces, there's several different specialties. You're either a weapons guy, a commo guy, a demo guy, or a medic. And they tell you what you're going to be based off your tests and aptitudes. And I wanted to be a weapons guy because I love guns. And they're like, no, you're going to be a medic. I'm like, okay, I'll be a medic. And the medical 18 Deltas, the specialty that is, that's like 2 years of training. And it's academically, it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Mentally challenging, academically challenging. You learn everything from dentistry, pharmacology, laboratory work, veterinary medicine. I mean, anything to do with any type of medicine is that's your job, and you got to learn it, and you got to be good at it. It's whether it's trauma or it doesn't matter. It's everything. So you're everything. The day one you go in is anatomy and physiology, and you're working with cadavers and everything like that. So it's I enjoyed it. I love a challenge. I love a good fight. So it was a lot, but guys still failed out. I think my graduating class had 12 guys, and we started with 60. Wow. And those are 60 guys that made it through selection. So I think we had 12 guys that made it. So the attrition rate continues. So I don't know what the attrition was of the guys in selection to even get that far. I don't even know. It's so it was a good time. Very difficult, but it was a good time.
Is it true you guys, Special Forces medics, can perform surgeries?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's part of it too. I mean, I've done amputations. I've done wound debridements. I've done. Oh my gosh, we do rotations. I've scrubbed into surgeries here stateside. Obviously, we're sitting there under the guise of surgeons, but I worked at shock trauma in Baltimore. I did rotations in New York City. Tampa. I've sat in, scrubbed in, and you name it, and we've done it. I've delivered babies here stateside. I've delivered babies overseas. We pretty much we do everything. You know, it was funny is so the very first baby I delivered. Obviously, they you know, for licensing purposes, you always have a licensed provider right there next to you. So the very first baby I delivered during my training was at Beaumont Army Medical Center in El Paso, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And the person that was watching me actually delivered my second son, because that's where my two oldest sons were born.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wait a minute, you delivered my son. Of course they don't remember you. You know, they deliver a ton of babies. So yeah, we kind of do everything. We wear a lot of different hats.
Interesting stuff. He is Michael Rodriguez, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm Mark Zinno, your host. And again, Michael, retired Special Forces Green Beret, 9 deployments. After you finish assessment selection and the Q course and everything else, you know, you're talking about like a 2-year process when it's all, you know, said and done, unless you're able to do it back to back. Were you able to shove it all into a year plus?
Oh, no, it was 2 years.
Okay, all right.
So, years, yeah.
I mean, well, but then this is where everything starts to ramp up, because 9/11 has not happened yet, correct?
Right.
Okay, so when does it happen, and where are you?
So, I graduate the Q course, and I go to 7th Special Forces Group, and with each of the groups are regionally oriented, much like the SEAL teams, they're regionally oriented. So what I really like about Special Forces, and if you remember earlier, I talked about that. One of the things I noticed, I was working with the people. They seem to interact with the people more. So you're regionally oriented, so they teach you the languages of that region. So we have guys that speak, actually I have a cousin that was a Special Forces Green Beret. He speaks Mandarin Chinese, you know. You have guys that speak Russian, Pashto, Dari, Arabic. So 7th Special Forces Group is regionally oriented for Central and South America. So is Spanish. So I kind of had a leg up. So I spoke Spanish. I'm like, all right, cool. You know, I get something easy for a change. So it's Spanish, but I didn't have to go to language school, but I wanted to go. Yeah, I could have gone right to the group after I graduated.
Would they have just made you test out of it, Mike? I mean, you just basically got to take the language. Okay.
Right, but I was like, you know what? I want the opportunity to improve my Spanish, you know, because I knew that I would be asked to do certain things I didn't do as a child. You know, I never had to give a class in Spanish in my life, you know, so I wanted to learn. So I did go to Spanish school or language school for Spanish. So then I get to my group and we deploy to Colombia, where I've been many times. So we go to Colombia for a lot of the stuff that goes on in Colombia. And we worked with some guys. They're called the Jungla, Jungla, Jungla guys. And they're like they're police officers, but they're like the Delta Force of police officers in Colombia. These guys are the ones hitting the drug labs. They're phenomenal operators. These guys are awesome. So we got to go down there and work with them, train with them, do some stuff with them. And then following that, afterwards, I get back to Bragg, and you're always either training for a mission or getting ready or on mission. So we're getting ready for another one. And then I remember I was at 7th Group headquarters in the basement. We were doing some stuff, and that's when the towers fell. And of course the entire world changed.
So how quickly do you actually get to the Middle East after 9/11?
So it was for me, it was this is the thing too. So for me, it wasn't for a few years after the towers fell, because, you know, we didn't, as Special Forces, and this is, you know, at any given time, you're going to find Special Forces team in anywhere between 85 to 100, 110 countries every day. So those missions come from, you know, they're global missions. So we've been deployed globally 6 to 8 months every year before the war started. And so those missions, we just didn't stop, you know, because those missions are strategically important for our national security interests. You know, so when we go, some of our missions will go and we'll train a foreign military to fight for themselves. That keeps our military having to fight for them. You know, so that's one of the missions. It's foreign internal defense that Special Forces does, outside of, you know, hunting down bad guys and doing all the other stuff, counterterrorism, unconventional warfare, any other mission sets. So those missions didn't go away. So we still had those requirements, but now we had additional requirements with fighting a war. So obviously the first to go into Afghanistan and Iraq were those groups that's their region. I mean, it makes sense, which was 5th Group. Those were the first guys to go into Afghanistan. So then but the requirements were so large that they couldn't fill it. They couldn't fill them. So then we started sending guys, sending teams as well. So I still deployed to South America a couple more times before I actually ended up to Afghanistan.
Did you feel like, I remember you telling me before, it was always, I wanted to get into the fight. Did you feel like you weren't in the fight in South America? Did you feel like this yearning to go to the Middle East where everything was going on?
Oh yeah, of course, because my brothers and sisters were dying. That's my family. So of course, yeah, I wanted to get over there as soon as we possibly could. But at that point in my career, I've been in long enough to understand like I mentioned, the strategic reason why we were doing what we did. Because if we didn't, then things would pop off somewhere else. So, but you're right. I had to get in the fight just like everybody else.
Let me circle back to something you mentioned before, that your father, who was in Vietnam, and your grandfathers didn't talk much about their wartime experiences other than the people who were there. Now that you had, the world had changed and you were deploying to places around the world and been in combat, did any of that ever change? Did you ever have discussions with them after the fact, or did they ever open up to you about certain things, about how to protect yourself, how to stay alive, anything of that nature?
It changed immediately after my first deployment to Somalia, because as soon as I came back, then they saw me. I wasn't just, their son. I wasn't just their grandson. I was a fellow combat veteran, and which is a unique relationship amongst all those that served, unless it's just hard to describe. But so then that's when they opened up and started sharing a little bit more about their service with me, because they weren't, that relationship's always there, father, son, grandson, grandfather. But that's when they opened up.
Do you appreciate that? Did you enjoy hearing about it?
Oh, I was shocked. I never thought it would happen. It's something I always wanted, but when they started talking about it, then it was I didn't know what to say. It was just very very special moment for me, and it still is. I still talk to my dad, and both my grandfathers have passed since, but it still is. We tell stories, we tell funny stories, we tell shitty stories. That's when the shitty stories started coming out. The stories of that not everybody likes to hear and very few people share.
When you develop that connection, and this is not people who aren't military may have a hard time understanding this, but did at any point in time, did you ever look at your dad as a fellow soldier as opposed to your dad, that you could communicate in certain ways? Because sure, that's your father and you're his son, and there's that special connection there, but there's, as you've detailed and as your father detailed, there's a special connection to the guy next to you who you're serving with.
Right. And so I had as if I could find any other reason. I didn't need one to respect my father even more, but I understood, why he did not want, his children to go through some of that crap. I understood that, because when I had that conversation with my father because he had to sign the paperwork to allow me to join the military at 17, he gave me his read. We had this talk, and he was like, "Mijo, I want you to do different. I want this for you. I want better for you. I want better. What about this? Here's some different options." Fast forward, I don't know, 30 years. I'm having the exact same conversation with my oldest son when he graduates high school. Not that I never encourage nor do I discourage military service. It's a personal decision that every individual should have. So I'm not a good recruiter. I'll tell you the truth. And I think that's a personal decision you got to make, because I know what's asked of you. But when my son came to me and he told me, and I was like, "Mijo, why don't you try college? Maybe go in as an officer, or to see, maybe you can get into West Point, prep school, something." It was crazy. He told me almost the exact same thing I told my father. He goes, "Dad, I want to serve my country. I've seen what you did. I've seen what Mom did, because my wife served for 21 years as well. I've seen what, I've heard the stories about Grandpa. I want to serve my country, and that's what I want to do. And I think that's why I'm here, And it was crazy.
That's got to be a special moment, though, man. Like, oh my gosh, man. It makes me almost tear up hearing the whole, thing go down.
Yeah, it was, I'm getting all like choked up trying to tell the damn story. It was amazing. I was like, wow, I could not have been prouder. But whatever he does, I'm going to be, obviously you're always proud of your children. But it was something I hadn't anticipated. So then, he said, "Dad, I want to do this. I want to this is what I want to do. And of course, I'm like, well, what about some of these jobs that, and he's like, nope. So, he's like, so my son's an airborne infantryman in the 82nd Airborne Division. And I'm like, all right, there you go.
Oh, proud dad right there. He is Michael Rodriguez, our guest this week on Kill to Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. When we come back, we will finish up Michael's military service and on to becoming the president and CEO of the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation, a huge task. We'll do that coming up next. Don't go anywhere.
You are listening to the Kill to Quit podcast hour presented by Kill Cliff Performance Strengths, proud partner of the Navy SEAL Foundation.
Welcome back to Kill to Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is Michael Rodriguez, a retired Special Forces Green Beret, 9 deployments overseas, 21 years of service, and the president and CEO of the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation. We last left off, Michael was finishing up his time in the Middle East. Look, you've done multiple deployments, and I know that you were medically retired. Did you want to serve longer, or was the fact that your injuries from overseas kind of ended things for you?
I did. I'm not gonna lie, man. I went kicking and screaming. I did not. So every time I got wounded or hurt, I kind of downplayed what was going on with me because, like even the last time I got blown up, I lost vision in my left eye. I didn't lose my left eye. I just lost vision in it. I didn't tell anybody. I was a senior. I was a senior Delta. I was a senior medic on the ground. I got hurt. I got rocked pretty hard, and I knew if I'd said anything, I would have got medevac, and I probably pulled out of theater, and all kinds of other stuff was going to happen. So I didn't say nothing. I was like, I'm good, because we were still on our way to. We still hadn't got to where we were going to get to find the bad guys, And I'm like, no, so I hit it. So every time I would get injured, and really throughout my entire career, I never told anybody. I was just hiding, and that's. When I talk to people that never served, and I tell them like, yeah, I didn't tell anyone. They're like, oh my God, what do you mean? And I like to put it this way: I'm not special by any means. I'm not some super badass guy, or hell no. So this is how I put it, so people can understand why I never told anybody I got injured, and why I never brought it forward. So I want you to imagine what everyone think about back to when you're a kid, right? And think about, like, say you're 10 years old and we all played tag. Think about when you're like 10 years old and you're playing tag. Imagine you're having the best game of tag in your life. No one can catch you. You're just killing it. I mean, you're just having a great day. You fall down, skin your knee. Did you stop playing tag? No, you got your ass back up and you continue to play. And that's how I kind of, when I tell people that, that's why I look at it. Every time I got wounded, I never told anybody. And I was fortunate that I was able to hide the injuries I had. A lot of them were brain injuries, so it wasn't like apparent. So that's what I tell people. It's just, I'm not special. I did what anybody else would have done given the same circumstances. So I didn't. So I hid a lot of my injuries. And I knew after my last deployment, where I got actually 3 pretty significant brain injuries within about a 6 week time frame. I was bad. I mean, I barely remember a little bit. It was just very bad. I mean, I was blind for 3.5 months. I couldn't see out of my left eye. But I didn't say nothing. So I knew when I got back.
But nobody noticed? Nobody noticed? Like you weren't walking funny or anything? Like you were kind of just leaning to one side?
I don't think so. And I'll be honest, I was, so on my last deployment, I was one of the senior guys on the team. Me and another guy had been on that team longer than anybody else, more than our team sergeant or team leader. And, we're a tough love group. And I was a pretty mean guy. So I don't think anybody would have told me anything, they were just like, oh, it's just freaking Rod. He's just pissed off and angry at everybody, and so no one said anything. And if they had maybe noticed, they were probably like, nah, I'm not telling Rod shit because they need to jump in my ass, so they didn't really, they just kind of just let me alone to go do my thing. Cause I was always yelling. I was always like stomping around. I wasn't a very nice guy. So I knew after that deployment, I was slotted to go be an instructor here at Fort Bragg at the Special Warfare Center, because, you got to go back to teach, and you should. If you have all this knowledge, you should go back and teach. I believe everyone should. So, I was a medic, but I was also the senior sniper for my team. So within Special Forces, we have those specialties, but we learn everybody else's job. I can do everything the weapons guy can do, demo guy can do, the combo guy can do. So I was the sniper as well. And I was a senior sniper. So I was going to teach at our sniper course here for Bragg. So I'm like, well, I'll get better. You know, things will get better. And they didn't. They got worse. And then while I was teaching here, I got a few more brain injuries because, you know, as a child, I used to box and I like combative. So then I was making it worse, really. So then when I was going through here, I was teaching, and then finally I was starting to have seizures, but I was able to hide them because, you know, I would get it's called an aura. Before you have a seizure, some people, they can tell. So I'd be on the line teaching guys, you know, teaching students how to shoot. And then I'd feel like I would have like a funny taste in my mouth, like someone put a penny in my mouth. And I'm like, hey, hold on, guys, I'll be right back. You guys can continue to train. And I go sit in the Humvee, and I have a seizure. I'd have about 30 seconds. I knew about 30 seconds to get to somewhere when no one would see me. I'd go hide. I'd have a seizure. Take me a few minutes, like 3-4 minutes to recover. And then I'd go back out and teach because I did not want to lose my job. You know, much like I think everyone that joins the military and chooses to do that, a lot of us, that's our identity. We take that on as our sole identity. Yeah, we're a father, a husband, a brother, a son, a teammate, but we're terrified to lose our jobs. At least I was, and I think a lot of guys were as well. So that's what pushed me to hide it. And then finally, you know, someone took notice, my command, and they're like, "Rob, what the hell's going on?" I'm like, you know, and I had a big, you know, come to the Lord moment, and I told them everything. So then they sent me to get checked. I went to Walter Reed up in Bethesda, and you know, like, you know, guys have an injury, like professional athletes, you know, they'll have a knee injury, but they don't say nothing. They want to keep playing. They want to keep playing. Then they finally will get checked. And they're like, man, your ACL, PCL, LCL, and MCL are destroyed. You're out of the game forever, you know. And that was kind of like what happened for me. I went up there. I got diagnosed with obviously all the multiple brain injuries I had through my entire career had added up. I had already started developing Parkinson's. I had like tremors. My vision had come back, but it was diplopia. I had double vision. So, you know, a whole host of stuff. The doctors are like, I left with like 19 different diagnoses, you know, stuff I didn't know was wrong, you know? And so for me, and then that's when they told me, they're like, hey, you can no longer perform your duties as a Special Forces Green Beret. We are initiating medical retirement proceedings. So that was like, oh my God, what now? And that kind of pretty much ended my career. So to answer your question, I was not happy. I went kicking and screaming. I did the whole, you know, made some very bad choices, you know, turned into an alcoholic and, you know, really went into a serious state of depression, fighting post-traumatic stress. So it's not the best story, but that's what happened to me. So I did not want to be retired because that's what I saw myself as. I was you know, that was me. That's, you know, never mind. I was a father of 3 sons and, you know, the husband to a wife who was still wearing the uniform at the time, or any of that stuff. I was a Special Forces Green Beret, and that was my priority. And so I was not happy. My retirement was not so bueno. I'll tell you that much.
No, okay, but let's 2 things. Let's go back here. Do you think that if you had addressed some of these medical concerns at the time that they'd happened, things would have turned out differently?
Yes, that's what the doctors told me. I got scolded like a 6-year-old child for doing what I did. I'll hide stuff, but I don't lie, you know. So so when they asked me, I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna lie to this healthcare professional. I'm not gonna lie to this doctor. I'm not gonna lie to my command when they finally asked me, Rod, what's going on? What's wrong? You know, why did you fall down? You know, I finally had a seizure in front of somebody. So I told the truth. And they told me, they're like, how long? So then I went through and, you know, and all these injuries, whether traumatic brain injuries in combat or brain injuries I had in training, you know, because even our training is pretty high risk. You know, I had eaten charges. I used to like putting charges on the door, like an explosive breaching charge. And sometimes you're too close to it, you know, but it happens, you know. I fell out of a helicopter one time doing fast roping, but I stumbled my way off. You know, I like to joke, you know, I'm like a roach, you know, I just kept coming back for whatever reason. But the doctors told me, they're like, you should have addressed this years ago. Things would have been different. But, you know, I'm not going to live in the past. You know, those are choices I made. Would I change my decisions? No. because every decision I made allowed me to experience everything I experienced between now and then. So that I'm not going to live with regret, So
Well, no,
it may have been
I'm not
different.
assuming you should live with regret. I guess I wonder now, as a father, if your son would do the same thing, would you be angry with him?
Yes, and it's funny you bring up my son. So he did something very similar. So my son injured himself. So my son deployed for his first deployment. He went to Afghanistan last year, to the Helmand province. He deployed in June of 2017, and he injured himself before he was deploying. But true to form, he didn't say nothing. He injured his hip pretty significantly. He didn't say nothing. So then he goes to Afghanistan, does his, walks in the mountains and does everything they do out there. Then it comes home, and then finally, he's very similar. Obviously, it's a different situation, but he's recovering right now from surgery on his hip because he tore some of his labrums before he deployed. But he didn't want to say nothing because he wanted to deploy, he wanted to get in the fight, and he did. So yeah, I would be. But I can't really scold him. I'm upset.
The apple doesn't fall far, Michael. The apple does not fall far.
Right. So yeah, it's lessons learned, and I hope he learned at this stage of his life that he won't make the same mistakes.
All right. So after you're medically retired, you have to figure out what's next. I mean, you mentioned you go through depression and everything, but obviously you refocus your efforts elsewhere in the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation. How does that come about, and where is the whole thing now?
Sure. So when I retired, I went through that period, and I got back into. I'm like, you know what? I need to go back to what I've always been was an athlete. So I got back into fitness, which was I think saved my life. Seriously, so it allowed me an opportunity to go back to something I'll always be in whatever capacity. But then I'm also someone that wants to serve and give back. Various nonprofits that stepped up to help me in my transition and during my was it 6 months in hospitals. And so I started volunteering with various different nonprofits, and then it that were there for me. And it kind of grew and to me just serving. I just wanted to give back. And it was, I've been volunteering with President Bush for the past 3 years. He selected me to sit on his advisory council. So I guide President Bush's, I'm sort of guide a strategic vision on how to better serve post 9/11 veterans and their families. So I've been working with him the past 3 years. I see him quite a bit. And then, so as I was volunteering my profile, I guess, I got to see a lot more different various nonprofits. Then I was introduced over 2 years ago to the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation, which was founded in 2015. They asked me to join the board, and their goal was to build a national Global War on Terror memorial in Washington, D.C., much like the Vietnam War, World War II, and the Korean War memorials that exist in the World War I. That's going up, and the Desert Storm that's going to be coming here very shortly. So I was like, yeah, of course. So I joined the board. It's a little over 2.5 years ago, but we were faced with an obstacle that the federal law stated stated that a war had to be over for a period of 10 years in order for a national war memorial to be built, and that was in 1986, where that came out. That may have been a good idea in 1986, but it does not apply now. We're in a multi-generational conflict with no end in sight. This war has no precedent, so we can't base honoring those that serve in this war off of any other war because there's no precedence for it. So in 2017, if you can imagine this happening, we introduced a piece of legislation that passed unanimously through the House and Senate and was signed by President Trump in 2017. In 6 months, we changed federal law last year that authorizes us to do that. So at the start of this year, I was asked to take over the organization. I'm still on the board, so I became the president and CEO of the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation. And really right now we're in the processes of, it's a 24-step process to build a war memorial in our nation's capital. And it's quite the bureaucratic obstacle course, as I'm sure anyone can imagine. So we're right now in the stages of site selection. Steps 9 through 12 is where we're at. So I have to go before various commissions within that exist that kind of oversee this entire process. So that's kind of where we're at, building the board. We're in a transition phase. President Bush joined my board. A couple other good friends of mine, Joe Pinto, President CEO 7-Eleven, a veteran as well, joined. We've got Ken Hirsch, a very a good friend of mine, a very trusted guy, joined the board. So we have GWAT vets on the board. We've got family members. So we're that's kind of where we're at right now with regard to building this memorial. And I think it's very important because, especially right now, because we have at any given time, less than 1% of our nation wears the uniform of this country. And people look at that, their initial reaction is like, oh my gosh, that's bad. Well, coming from that 1%, where I served 21 years, deployed 9 times. My wife just retired last year after 21 years, deployed 6 times. My son just came home from Afghanistan this year, so that's 16 deployments for my family. I'm proud that it only takes 1% to protect the 99%. That's phenomenal. That speaks to the strength, resiliency, selfless service of that 1%. But we need to, honor their service and sacrifice. And so there's this huge disconnect, between civilians and military. You hear this common term tossed around, and I think it's false, where there's a civilian military divide. We do not have a civilian military divide. I'll say that every single day till I die. Well, my father, when he came home from Vietnam, experienced a civilian military divide. What we have today is a misunderstanding. During World War II, 11% of the population served. Korea was 7%. Vietnam was 4%. We're at 1%. So we just have a misunderstanding. And what I hope to do with the building of this National Global War on Terror Memorial is to educate the 99% on who we are and why we serve, and really start a lot of conversations about the current global war on terror that people don't even know. It's almost become a forgotten war. Because of that 1% that steps up to serve, people feel they don't connect with that 1%. But if you look at the military, you look at my son's platoon here in the 82nd Airborne Division, look at the demographics or whatever social label those individuals choose to identify with, whether their sex, their race, creed, religion, whatever social label they decide to take on or feel a part of, you are not going to find a more diverse working group in existence in the world. You won't. So in essence, that 1%, we're a direct reflection of the 99%. And people don't realize that. They do not understand that. The most diverse and inclusive organization that exists is the United States military, by far. And so what I hope to do, with the building this, is educate people, and there's 4 tenets that we're going to be holding to. One is to honor the service and sacrifices of those, my brothers and sisters, that never got a chance to take off the uniform, but we're going to honor the service and sacrifices of everyone. And that includes those that didn't, that supported those of us, because I watched my wife go to war. I watched my son go to war. It is far harder to do that than it is to go to war. So
exactly. The
family members, the children, the loved ones, and I also fought side by side with those people Americans who stepped up in various different contractors that decided to serve this nation in different capacities, and in keeping with our mission, I want to honor their service and sacrifice as well. Whatever their motivations were, it doesn't matter. They were there serving this nation and our national security interests, so there's honor. We want to heal. We want to provide a point of healing, not only for those that serve, but for us as a nation. We want to provide that opportunity for everyone to heal. We're also going to empower. And how do you empower? Empowerment. Empower is a great word, but that'll be through education and engagement. Talking about it, engaging. Breaking down that misunderstanding. That exists. And most importantly, I think, is by building this national memorial, we're going to unite. We're going to unite everyone together. I want everyone to remember what they felt like after the attacks of 9/11. Albeit we remember the tragedy and we mourn the losses of those victims, although all those that were attacked that day. But we were so united as a nation. That's what I want people to remember. We're not building a 9/11 memorial. There's phenomenal 9/11 memorials that exist. In Pennsylvania, in Washington, D.C., and in New York City at the 4 crash sites. This is not a 9/11 memorial. What this is a memorial to our nation's response because of 9/11. So it's something different. And that's what I hope we'll be able to do, is unite everyone, remind everybody what it was like. We are an entire nation of immigrants. We're a big mixed bag of folks, but we're American.
Perfectly said, Michael. Beautifully said. And it's certainly a honorable foundation that you're a part of, and a great thing that you're trying to do. And again, thank you for your 20 plus years of service, continued success for you, and hopefully your health starts to return after all your injuries, and that part is in order. But again, thank you for your family. You've created a legacy for your grandfather, your father, yourself, and now your son carries that forward. And so, as does your wife and the rest of your children. But I can't thank you enough for joining us here on Kill the Quit. Just an amazing story. And again, it is the Global War on Terror Memorial Foundation. He is Michael Rodriguez. Thanks for being part of Kill the Quit, brother.
No, hey, thanks for having me, man. It was a great time. Really enjoyed talking with you, Mark.
All right. This has been another edition of Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. We'll see you next week.
WFON and W292EV Marietta,
a Dickey broadcasting station.
Live from the Wellstar Health System Studios.
1230 and 106.3 FM, The Sports X.